Hi folks, Tom here. Over the years, I've become a collector of entertainment memorabilia. Today, we'll take a tour of my collection. The video is also a tribute to the people who are depicted in the memorabilia. Tom's Tour and Tribute. Yeah, I like that. This is my longest, most complex video. After spending hours doing the research and collecting all of the media, I dumped the hundreds of elements into the editing suite and lashed them all together. Here's a photo of all the elements that went into one segment of the video. It was a maddening labor of love. We'll begin with some miscellaneous memorabilia, including items from my favorite author and an item from my favorite artist. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the tour. We begin with an 8.5 by 11 typed signed letter from novelist Tom Robbins. In 1995, my wife Jan turned me on to the novelist. I was instantly smitten with his witty, wondrous wordsmithery. I read my wife's copies of all of his books. In 2016, this fervent fanboy wrote a gushing letter of praise to Mr. Robbins. Here's a portion of that letter. The first sentence in your first novel involves a magician. All of your subsequent novels include references to magic. I'm a magician and licensed psychotherapist. I give good head. My wife introduced me to your unique oeuvre. You quickly became and remain my favorite novelist. I bow deeply and stand in awe of your prestidigitative prose, your simile sorcery, your magical metaphors, and your syntactic sleight of hand. As a token of my thanks, I've included an impossible object called a hypercard. I look forward to devouring your future offerings of literary legerdemain. So, several weeks later, I was amazed to receive a letter from LaConner, Washington. I carefully opened the envelope. With trembling hands, I removed the letter and opened it. My hero wrote to me. I peed a pinch in my pants. In the ensuing 8 years, I've read the letter, about 8,000 times. Here's a roundup of Tom Robbins' novels, with notable quotes from each book, plus additional quotes. 1971, another roadside attraction. Human beings were invented by water as a device for transporting itself from one place to another. Using words to describe magic is like using a screwdriver to cut roast beef. Babylonian slobber magic. 1976, even cowgirls get the blues. In 1993, Gus Van Sant directed the film adaptation of the book. No one liked it, not even me. Disbelief in magic can force a poor soul into believing in government and business. The moon, narrow and pale like a paring snipped from a snowman's toenail. His voice wore no pants. 1980, Still Life with Woodpecker. There are only two mantras, yum and yuck. Mine is yum. Space is merely a device to prevent everything from being in the same spot. Her astonishingly round breasts jiggled ever so slightly, like balls balanced on the nose of Valium-eating seals. 1994, Jitterbug Perfume. Does koala bear poop smell like cough drops? The sky was the color of Edgar Allan Poe's pajamas. Bandaged in dirty clouds and seeping rabbit milk from a wound in its side, the sun rolls the stone from the tomb of night to emerge, pale, blinking, but triumphant. 1990, skinny legs and all. This is the room of the Wolf Mother wallpaper. Summer had come to sit on New York's face. His heart felt like an iron piano with barbed wire strings and scorpions for keys. 1994, half asleep in frog pajamas. In the beginning was the thing, and one thing led to another. Salvador Dali and 50 cents will get you a cup of clock melt. A woman with a face like a slab of Cro-Magnon bacon regards you with a ripple of recognition on the flat yellow surface of her ox bile eyes. In 2000, he brought us fierce invalids home from hot climates. I like to drink just enough to change the temperature in the brain room. I'll turn to less mainstream substances if I want to rearrange the furniture. Naked, she lay sprawled on her side like a shipwrecked cello. Their kiss was like a paper airplane landing on the moon. 2003, Villa Incognito. Eating a raw oyster is like French kissing a mermaid. He cackles like a mechanical magpie laying a barbed wire egg. The entire winter passed as peacefully and leisurely as a python digesting a Valium addict. In 2014, Robbins published his autobiographical Tibetan Peach Pie. As a child, I was an imaginary playmate. At the meeting of our lips, peacocks went into hiding, elephants suffered memory loss, camels developed a maddening thirst, and dinosaurs long thought to be extinct turned up on the evening news. We froze. The night, the earth, the universe slammed on its brakes. Time sucked on a chloroform popsicle. Tom Robbins is 92 years old and lives in LaConner, Washington. The first issue of Rolling Stone magazine, 10 inches by 12 inches. Rolling Stone was founded in San Francisco in 1967 by Jan Wenner and Ralph J. Gleason. The first issue of the bi-weekly magazine was released on November 9, 1967. The cover depicts John Lennon in costume for the film How I Won the War. Rolling Stone initially identified with and reported on hippie drug culture and its music. Wenner wrote that Rolling Stone is not just about the music, but about the things and attitudes that music embraces. In 1970, the magazine began publishing the captivating photographs of Annie Leibovitz. She created several iconic covers. In October 1970, Rolling Stone first published the writing of the father of gonzo journalism, Hunter S. Thompson. Thompson published excerpts of his most famous work, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, in the pages of Rolling Stone. Thompson contributed articles to the magazine until 2004. Through Thompson, we were introduced to the grotesquely amusing art of Ralph Steadman. Rolling Stone also helped to launch the careers of writers Cameron Crowe and Tom Wolfe. I loved the magazine until the late 70s. After that, it began to increase its coverage of celebrities, sports, television, films, and pop culture, and decrease its focus on rock and roll. Its accelerating emphasis on style over substance continued and resulted in the vapid, irrelevant People magazine that it is today. Oh, but for 10 years, it was the go-to source for everything rock and roll. A signed 8.5 by 10-inch photo of chemist Dr. Albert Hofmann. Albert Hofmann was a Swiss chemist working for Sandoz Laboratories in Basel, Switzerland. November 16, 1938. Hofmann synthesized a compound that he hoped would be a circulatory and respiratory stimulant. He called it LSD-25. It was tested on animals, but it didn't produce the desired effects. Colleagues showed no interest in it, so testing was discontinued. April 16, 1943. Hofmann wrote, "A peculiar presentiment, the feeling that this substance could possess properties other than those established in the first investigations, induced me, 5 years after the first synthesis, to produce LSD-25 once again so that a sample could be given to the pharmacological department for further tests." After synthesizing LSD, Hofmann accidentally absorbed a small amount of it. This was the first human experience with LSD. In his notes, he writes, "I was forced to interrupt my work in the laboratory in the middle of the afternoon and proceed home, being affected by a remarkable restlessness combined with a slight dizziness. At home I lay down and sank into a not unpleasant intoxicated-like condition characterized by extremely stimulated imagination. In a dreamlike state, with eyes closed, I perceived an uninterrupted stream of fantastic pictures, extraordinary shapes with intense kaleidoscopic play of colors. After some 2 hours, this condition faded away." And I'm sure he thought, very interesting. I must try this again. April 19, 1943, 4:20 p.m. The real 4:20. Albert Hofmann took 250 micrograms of LSD, the smallest dose he thought might produce noticeable effects. At 5 p.m., he began to feel dizzy and decided to ride his bicycle home. On the bike ride, the effects increased. He says, "I had great difficulty in speaking clearly, and my field of vision fluctuated and swam like an image in a distorted mirror. I had the feeling that I was not moving from the spot, although my colleagues said I was moving at a fast pace." When he arrived home, a neighbor called the nearest doctor. The symptoms soon overwhelmed him. Hofmann noted dizziness, visual disturbances. The faces of those present seemed vividly colored and grimacing. Powerful motor disturbances alternating with paralysis. My head, body, and limbs all felt heavy, as if filled with metal. A metallic taste on the tongue, dry and constricted throat, a feeling of suffocation. Confusion, alternating with clear recognition of my situation, in which I felt outside myself as a neutral observer as I half-crazily cried or muttered indistinctly. Since Hofmann had no idea how LSD would affect him, it's not surprising that he thought he was going to go crazy or that he was dying. When Dr. Walter Schilling arrived, he says, "The peak of the crisis was already past." Schilling was struck by Hofmann's motor disturbances and anxious mood, but he couldn't find anything seriously wrong with him. He says, "Objectively, his heart action was regular, his pulse was average, his breathing was calm and deep." An hour later, Hofmann notes, "Little by little, I could begin to enjoy the unprecedented colors and plays of shapes that persisted behind my closed eyes. Then come the kaleidoscopes and colorful fountains. The next morning, a sensation of well-being and renewed life suffused me. The world was as if newly created." Today, those of us in the know celebrate April 19th as Bicycle Day. 1947. Sandoz Laboratories marketed LSD under the name Delicid as a psychiatric drug to be used for treating a wide variety of mental disorders. Sandoz provided researchers with free supplies of LSD. In its marketing literature, Sandoz suggested that psychiatrists take LSD to gain a better subjective understanding of the schizophrenic experience. And many did. 1958. Albert Hofmann isolated and determined the structure of the two active agents in magic mushrooms. He named them psilocybin and psilocin. 1960, Sandoz Pharmaceutical began producing psilocybin pills called indocybin. Each pill contained 2 milligrams of psilocybin. Dr. Albert Hofmann died on April 29, 2008. He was 102 years old. He discovered another world and forever changed our mind about the mind. A signed, numbered print of Hans Rudi Giger's Alien Egg version 2, 27 by 20 inches. I first encountered the incredible art of Swiss artist H.R. Giger when I bought Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Brain Salad Surgery album in 1973. I had never seen or imagined anything like it. In 1978, Giger's Necronomicon was published, and I quickly bought it. Repulsively beautiful. The stuff of nightmares. In 1979, one of the best monster movies ever made, Alien, premiered. Giger created the xenomorph, the alien spacecraft, the space jockey, the egg chamber, and the alien environment. He won the 1980 Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. In 1985, the long-awaited Necronomicon 2 was published. In 1986, despite or perhaps due to winning the Oscar, Giger wasn't asked to participate in Aliens. Cheap bastards. In 1986, Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, was released. 2 of Giger's designs appear in the final cut of the film, including the Great Beast version of Kane. In 1990, Biomechanics was published. In 1992, Giger designed the dog-like alien for Alien 3. In 1993, Giger's Alien was published. In 1995, the movie Species was released. Giger designed Syl and the Ghost Train. In 2012, Prometheus was released. It includes the derelict spacecraft and space jockey designs from the first Alien film, a temple design from a failed Dune project, and original extraterrestrial murals created exclusively for Prometheus, based on conceptual art from Alien. 2017's Alien Covenant includes the alien creature, the derelict spacecraft, and the space jockey designs from the first Alien film. For many years, Giger didn't receive on-screen credit for Aliens, Alien Resurrection, Alien vs. Predator, and Alien vs. Predator Requiem. Happily, recent copies of these films now include on-screen credit for Giger's creation of the alien. On May 12, 2014, H.R. Giger died in a Zurich hospital after suffering injuries from a fall. He was 74 years old. That brings us to the end of my miscellaneous memorabilia. Now it's time for the main event. Before we dig into my collection, here's a quick biofilmography of the greatest director who ever lived. Stanley Kubrick was born July 26, 1928 in the Bronx, New York. From a young age, Kubrick was a voracious reader and was fascinated with photography and movies. He often skipped school in his effort to watch every movie released, regardless of its quality. For his 13th birthday, Kubrick's father bought him his first camera, a Graflex. He immediately began using it to photograph street life in New York. In 1945, at the age of 17, he sold his first photograph to Look magazine. His eye for composition was already apparent in this evocative photograph. While still in high school, Kubrick became a staff photographer for Look. He held that position for 5 years. Based upon his relentless consumption of movies, Kubrick concluded that most movies were lousy, and he was confident that he could do a better job. In 1951, Kubrick successfully transitioned from still photography to cinematography by writing, filming, editing, and directing 2 short documentaries, Day of the Fight and Flying Padre. At the age of 24, Kubrick directed his first feature film. Fear and Desire was released in 1953. His next film, Killer's Kiss, premiered in 1955. His first 2 features were not well received and didn't make any money. Years later, Kubrick dismissed them as amateurish. 1956, The Killing. Oh, this is a fine exemplar of film noir. Paths of Glory was released in 1957. It's a very good, gripping anti-war parable. Several weeks into shooting Spartacus, the film's producer and star, Kirk Douglas, fired director Anthony Mann. Douglas hired Kubrick to take over as director. Spartacus was released in 1960 and won 1961 Academy Awards for Best Supporting Actor, Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, and Best Costume Design. Kubrick's version of Vladimir Nabokov's scandalous novel Lolita was the first film that he shot in England, where he moved in 1961. To avoid getting an X rating, Kubrick had to neuter the book's sexuality. He lamented, "I wasn't able to give any weight at all to the erotic aspect of Humbert's relationship with Lolita." The film was released in 1961. It's a very good, surprisingly funny film. After Lolita was released, Columbia Pictures offered Kubrick an attractive contract. In June 1964, he declined the offer and wrote, "I must have complete, total, final, annihilating artistic control over the picture." And from that moment on, he did. Oh, he was a perfectionist. He controlled every detail of all aspects of his films, from pre-production to casting, locations, costumes, sets, props, lighting, writing, filming, editing, music, post-production, advertising, and distribution. Instead of renting film cameras and lenses like everyone else, Kubrick bought them. He often customized his cameras to fit specific lenses to achieve unique effects. His crew inspected every film projector in every theater that played his films to ensure that the projectors were functioning properly and wouldn't damage his film. If the projector wasn't up to snuff, the theater didn't get the movie. Kubrick also began engaging in an activity for which he would become infamous. He shot a lot of takes. I'm talking about 50, 75, 100 takes of one scene. Actors crumbled to the floor, sobbing, twitching, begging for mercy. Dr. Strangelove premiered in 1964, a masterpiece. Stay tuned. 1968, 2001, A Space Odyssey, a masterpiece. More to come. Clockwork Orange was released in 1972, a masterpiece. Details to follow. Barry Lyndon was released in 1975. It's Kubrick's most beautiful film, winning Academy Awards for Best Scoring, Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, and Best Costume Design. I don't like the character or his story. The Shining was released in 1980. By blurring the boundary between madness and the supernatural, Kubrick forever changed the psychological landscape of the ghost story. It earned the Guinness World Record for most retakes for one scene with dialogue. The scene involving Halloran talking with Danny Torrance about Shining took 148 takes. The Shining is an excellent film. It's become part of the cultural fabric. When people hear, "Here's Johnny," they don't think of Ed McMahon or Johnny Carson. They think of Jack Nicholson. Full Metal Jacket premiered in 1987, a masterpiece. Stick around. Kubrick's final film, Eyes Wide Shut, was released in 1999. Harvey Keitel was cast to play Victor Ziegler. In one scene, Ziegler enters a room, opens the door, and walks in. Kubrick shot the scene 68 times and still wasn't happy with Keitel's performance. Keitel was exasperated. So, Kubrick fired him and replaced him with Sidney Pollack. The film earned the Guinness World Record for the longest continuous film shoot of 400 days. Eyes Wide Shut explores the sexual psychology between a husband and wife and the dark underbelly of the wealthy and powerful elite. Kubrick creates a dream-like world that blurs the boundary between reality and fantasy. Nothing is as it seems, and no dream is ever just a dream. It's very good. All right, let's dive into my Kubrick collection, beginning with the ephemera. An original Dr. Strangelove movie poster, 27 by 41 inches. This is Kubrick's classic nightmare comedy about the absurdity of nuclear war. The characters have the best names of any Kubrick film. Dr. Strangelove, of course. President Merkin Muffley. Muff refers to neither a hand warmer nor clumsy handling. You may have to Google Merkin. General Buck Turgidson. Colonel Bat Guano. Brigadier General Jack D. Ripper. Major T.J. King Kong. The film was scheduled to premiere in December 1963, but on November 22nd, John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Its release was delayed until January 29, 1964, because Kubrick and Columbia Pictures believed the public would be in no mood to see the film any sooner. During post-production, one line by Slim Pickens, "A fella could have a pretty good weekend in Dallas with all this stuff," was dubbed to change Dallas to Vegas, because Kennedy was killed in Dallas. The film originally ended with a pie fight in the war room. Kubrick said, "I decided it was farce and not consistent with the satiric tone of the rest of the film." An original 2001 A Space Odyssey movie poster, 27 by 41 inches. The title is supposed to be vivid yellow. When I bought the poster, it was pale yellow. Despite being behind archival UV filtering glass, the remaining yellow has faded away. That's because my treacherous wife Jan won't keep the damn curtains closed. I may insist that she pay to have it restored. Yeah, right. This is the best science fiction film ever made. 56 years later, no film has come close to equaling it. Kubrick designed the film to be a pre-verbal, internal sensory experience for the viewer. Indeed, there was no dialogue in the first 25 minutes of the film and the last 23 minutes. One of the most iconic scenes is Moonwatcher discovering that he can use the bone as a weapon to smash the skulls. He throws the bone into the air and Kubrick cuts to a satellite orbiting the Earth. Early versions of the script explain that this is an American nuclear weapons satellite. We also see Chinese, French, and German weapons satellite in orbit. Later, Kubrick decided not to identify them as nuclear weapons because he wanted to avoid associations with Dr. Strangelove. In 1969, Kubrick won his only Academy Award for Best Visual Special Effects. 4 original mini lobby cards from Clockwork Orange, 8 by 10 inches. We begin and end with shots of the Kubrick stare, a close-up in which the actor looks out from under their brow line and tilts their head toward the camera. The term was coined by cinematographer Douglas Milsom to describe Malcolm McDowell's sinister facial expression. Stanley would include the Kubrick stare in all of his subsequent films. Other directors have also employed it. An original Clockwork Orange movie poster, 27 by 41 inches. This is my favorite movie of all time. When I hear Singin' in the Rain, I think of Alex DeLarge, not Gene Kelly. I was about 12 years old when I bought Anthony Burgess's book, A Clockwork Orange. I began reading it, but I couldn't understand it. After about 5 minutes, I returned the book and got my money back. The book read like gibberish because Burgess wrote it in Nadsat. Nadsat is fictional teenage slang comprised of a lyrical mashup of English with Elizabethan flourishes, Russian, Romany, and Cockney rhyming slang. Real horror show, Droog. Kubrick brilliantly depicts author Anthony Burgess's assertion that if a man loses the ability to choose, he ceases to be a man. Without free will, he becomes an automaton, or a Clockwork Orange. In the United States, Clockwork Orange was given an X rating in its original release in 1972. Later, Kubrick replaced approximately 30 seconds of sexually explicit footage from 2 scenes with less explicit action to obtain an R rating for a re-release later in 1972. But that's why the X-rated poster is much more valuable than the R-rated version. Except no substitutes. In 1973, concerned about reports of copycat violence and threats made to the safety of himself and his family, Kubrick withdrew the film from circulation in the UK. It wasn't re-released in the UK until after Kubrick's death in 1999. An original Full Metal Jacket movie poster, 27 by 41 inches. This is my favorite war movie, and one of the best of the genre. Kubrick masterfully conveys the dehumanizing effects of war and the insane dualism of killing for peace. The movie was filmed in England. The former RAF Bassingbourn Airfield was used to recreate the Marine Recruit Depot at Parris Island in South Carolina. The abandoned Becton Gas Works was used to recreate the bombed-out city of Hue in Vietnam. For 2 months, a wrecking ball was used to knock holes in the buildings. To decorate the locations, he imported 200 palm trees from Spain and 100,000 plastic tropical plants from Hong Kong. Former Marine drill instructor R. Lee Ermey was hired as a consultant, but when Kubrick heard him profanely excoriating the actors to prepare them for their roles, he gave the role of Hartman to him. Ermey improvised most of his dialogue and created one of the most repellently entertaining characters on film. Now let's check out my autographs, in increasing order of value. All of the autographs have certificates of authenticity. 2 4.5-inch tall Alex DeLarge Funkos in unopened boxes signed by Malcolm McDowell. I also bought 2 others to play with. These are the first Kubrick-related autographs that I purchased. Malcolm McDowell goes to the fan conventions, signs everything in sight, and he's still alive. So they're the least valuable items. However, the highest price paid for a rare glow-in-the-dark version of Alex was $60,000. These Funkos were my gateway drug. I remember thinking, these are great, but I must have Stanley's autographs. A 3.5 by 5.5-inch signed postcard commemorating the rollout of the Continental Airlines 727 Trijet. Continental began using the Trijet in 1967, so Kubrick probably signed his photograph around that time. The type of document and its content greatly affect the value of an autograph. The least valuable autograph is on a small piece of paper, a small card, or a cut from a larger document. This postcard falls into that category because it has nothing to do with Kubrick. A 4 by 6-inch photo of Kubrick signed by Kubrick. This appears to be a cut from a larger document, but because it is a photo of Kubrick, it's worth more than the postcard. A signed 8 by 10-inch photo of Stanley Kubrick and cinematographer John Alcott during production of The Shining. The photo has specific content, so the autograph is more valuable. A 24 by 36-inch poster of Clockwork Orange signed by Stanley Kubrick and Malcolm McDowell. The poster isn't original and appears to be from the late 80s. But with both Kubrick and McDowell's autographs, it's more valuable. An 8 by 10 photo from Clockwork Orange signed by Kubrick, McDowell, and Warren Clark, who played Dim. 3 signatures makes it even more valuable. A typed signed letter from Stanley Kubrick to Adrian Wooten, director of the British Film Institute. Because Kubrick typed and signed this letter, it's much more valuable than an autograph alone. Oh, and now, my prized possession. A signed, handwritten note on studio stationery from Stanley Kubrick to Jack friggin' Nicholson during production of The Shining. It doesn't get any better than this, baby. Stanley Kubrick died on March 7th, 1999. He was 70 years old. And that concludes the tour of my collection. I hope you enjoyed it and possibly learned a thing or two. If so, please stab the like button and tell everyone you know. I'll see you next time with more magic. Thanks for watching.